Well, the Real ID requirement being implemented starting today. Coming up, what you need to know if you plan to travel soon. And the conclave begins to choose a new pope. The latest from St. Peter's Square as the Cardinals have gathered to choose the next leader of the Catholic Church.
Covering news where you live. This is 5 News at noon.
Well, thank you for joining us. I'm Morgan Wrigley here with Stephen Elmore. We were out at XNA this morning. Big day there with the Real ID being implemented. So I want to see what's going on. But one thing we noticed is it started raining while we were there. Thankfully, we were inside.
Yeah, it's been gloomy. It's been rainy. We had some drizzle earlier as well. It's just one of those gross mornings so far. Going into the afternoon, similar. I think we see some clearing, which may not exactly work in our favor. We'll explain that here in just a second. You take a look at radar. You definitely see a lot of cloud coverage, but you can barely even see the rain that's coming down out there right now. Now, again, there is still some patchy drizzle, but it's not a heavy downpour. You're starting to see some of these little green returns here. That's some rain being picked up maybe across parts of I-40 and I-540 and I-49 there in Crawford, parts of Sebastian and Washington County as well. Outside of that, it's not a heavy downpour of some rain. Now, I will say, now by the time we get later on this afternoon into the evening hours, more than likely there's going to be some type of clearing. I think we see some peaks of sunshine. That may not work in our favor because later on this evening there is a chance for some more isolated thunderstorms. Let's break that down. Cold, cloudy and rainy throughout most of the day today, but with that clearing could see some resurgence of some of those thunderstorms later on this evening. Thunderstorm chances really continue off and on through your Friday. By the time we get to the weekend, we'll be looking good for Mother's Day weekend. So Northwest Arkansas, the rest of the day today, again, there is going to be some clearing by the time we get late this afternoon into the evening hours. Daytime highs still right around those upper 60s and low 70s. But then once we get late this evening, there's a chance for a few spotty showers, maybe even a few more of those isolated thunderstorms. Across the river valley, again, it's cloudy out there right now, but peaks of sunshine may just boost that atmosphere enough to where we could see some resurgence of some thunderstorms by the time we get later on this evening. Here's what I'm talking about. Futurecast shows us this. Again, by the time we get closer towards 4 or 5 p.m., yes, there is going to be some sunshine breaking out, but then we have to watch out for these individual cells that could cross over into some strong or even severe thunderstorms. The main concerns being some hail, if not some rotation this evening. We'll break down those threats coming up in just a bit.
Thanks, Stephen. Well, there have been some busy lines at local revenue offices this week. As we mentioned, Real ID requirements take effect at airports and federal buildings starting today. That means after today, you'll need one to board a flight or to enter a federal building. But if you haven't made the switch yet, don't panic. There are still some options. A passport or other TSA-approved forms of identification are still accepted, and your standard driver's license is still fine for driving and for non-federal uses. And it's also not too late to get your Real ID. The Arkansas Department of Finance and Administration says you can go to any revenue office in the state and walk out with your Real ID the same day. Well, history is in the making at the Vatican, where Cardinals are now taking part in selecting the next pope to lead the Catholic Church. The start of the conclaves comes with less than 3 weeks after the death of Pope Francis. CBS's Tina Kraus has the latest from the Vatican.
The Cardinals entered the Sistine Chapel and took an oath of secrecy as they began the process of choosing Pope Francis's successor. In the final Mass before the conclave began, the Dean of the College of Cardinals reminded them to set aside personal opinions and elect a pope who can see unity in diversity.
With Pope Francis being a more progressive pope, I think everyone's really on the cusp and anxious to see who they're going to pick next.
The so-called princes of the church have surrendered their phones and cut off communications with the outside world. They will keep casting ballots until they reach a 2/3 consensus. The 133 cardinals come from 70 countries, 10 of them from the U.S., and the vast majority chosen by Pope Francis himself.
They don't know each other very well. Pope Francis called them together very infrequently, only really once in 2014 for open discussion.
A new CBS News poll of U.S. Catholics shows more than a third hope the new pontiff will be more conservative than Pope Francis, while 21% want someone more progressive.
I would love as a Catholic to see more female in intervention in all parts of the service.
The church does not need to fit the age. That's why it's 2,000 years old.
Crowds are watching for smoke signals from the temporary chimney on the roof of the Sistine Chapel. Black means no decision. White smoke means a new pope and a new path for the world's 1.4 billion Catholics. Tina Kraus, CBS News, the Vatican.
Pope Francis was elected on the 5th ballot in 2013. Pope John Paul II needed 8 rounds of voting. And in continuing coverage, a Sequoia County judge says triple murder suspect Stacy Drake will stand trial. The decision comes after a 2-day pre-trial hearing in Sallisaw. Prosecutors called dozens of witnesses Tuesday, saying there's enough evidence to proceed with all 8 charges against Drake, including 3 counts of first-degree murder. He's accused of killing Philip Emerson in Canadian County, then Tara Underwood and Taylor Sharp at LaFerrie's Propane in Sequoia County. Law enforcement, victims' families, and others who saw Drake before his arrest took the stand over 2 days. And Tara Underwood's sister, Tia Barnett, says it's been an emotional week.
Kind of hard to kind of just sit there and listen, but it is very important to hear every bit of it.
Drake's next court date is scheduled for July 7th. Well, with parking shortages and rising housing demand, some Fayetteville city leaders want to change how many parking spaces are required when new developments come in. 5 News reporter Lauren Spencer has the details.
If everyone does their fair share, then one development doesn't consume all the available on-street parking. They leave some for the next developer.
Ward 2 council member Mike Wiedeker says the city doesn't have enough parking and that current reductions are straining neighborhoods.
Off-campus student housing in particular is just one example. We love the university, but when you build a development and take a 35% reduction in your parking, that may be putting 250 cars on the street that need to be accommodated.
Right now, developers can take a 35% reduction in the amount of parking they provide. But through this new ordinance, it would be a tiered approach, increasing parking requirements for residential projects.
If you don't incorporate parking, you create second-class citizens. So think about it. You have to park a quarter mile from where you live. Well, in today's rain, how's that fair and equitable for you?
Those with the group Fayetteville Strong believe the changes could drive up costs for developers and make it even harder to build in a city still facing a housing crisis.
What you end up is massive parking lots around apartment complexes that aren't being utilized, which has a negative effect of increasing the building costs, which we then see in increased rent. Also, it has a negative environmental impact, which is increase in the amount of impervious surface in the city, which leads to water runoff problems.
Ultimately, the council passed the measure 6-2, meaning the Planning Commission will now play a role in evaluating a property and parking needs. In Fayetteville, covering news where you live, Lauren Spencer, 5 News.
Well, nearly 4 months have passed since Fort Smith native Justin Baker disappeared in the Arkansas River. Now, an indigenous advocacy group is renewing calls for action in the effort to find him. Justin Baker, a 41-year-old Army veteran and Cherokee Nation citizen, vanished January 24th after a vehicle he was in plunged into the Arkansas River in Sequoia County. Crews searched for days but never recovered him. Now the group Noise is urging renewed search efforts and public awareness, pushing to keep Baker's case from going cold. Advocates say updates could come soon as they work alongside his family to bring him home. And dozens of Fort Smith families are being forced to find new housing as a longtime agreement between their apartment complex and the Department of Housing is set to expire. 5 News reporter Kayla Davis has more.
Housing and Urban Development, or HUD's moderate rehabilitation program started back in the 70s. The intention has been to help private property owners provide subsidized rent for tenants in need. But over the last 35 years, HUD stopped new funding for the program with plans to phase it out. Some years ago, 30,000 to 40,000 units across the country were under this program.
In fiscal year 2024, there were fewer than 12,000 units in the nation that were under the mod rehab program.
Boardwalk and College Terrace apartments in Fort Smith have been under that program for decades. According to the Fort Smith Housing Authority, or FSHA, 55 families at Boardwalk currently pay 30% of their income towards rent, while the FSHA covers the rest on behalf of HUD. With an August 1st deadline to leave Boardwalk and College Terrace, FSHA CEO Mitch Minnick is offering a solution.
We are able to transition the 55 families that are there at Boardwalk, transition them to the tenant-based housing choice voucher program where they can go out and choose, where they want to live, what landlord they want to rent from.
Through the voucher program, those residents would pay the same amount in their new home that they do now. And Minnick says there are plenty of units to find every family a home.
We have about a little bit more than 250 unique landlords participating with our tenant-based voucher program.
As far as the complex, Minnick says it's up to the owners what happens next with the units.
They can renovate the property, they could sell the property. That is completely up to them.
In Fort Smith, covering news where you live, Kayla Davis, 5 News.
Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt has signed a bill banning cell phones from classrooms into law. That means starting this fall, the law will require public school districts to limit students' cell phone usage from the start of class to the end. The law only covers the upcoming school year, and after that, districts will be able to adjust cell phone policies as they see fit. And in continuing coverage, Governor Stitt also vetoed a bill that would have continued federal funding to investigate cases of missing and murdered Indigenous Oklahomans. The law mandated that the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation create an office and hire liaisons dedicated to these cases through federal funding. Stitt says he supports solving the cases but couldn't sign legislation that singles out victims based on race. Most recent data from the National Crime Information Center reports 5,712 cases of missing Indigenous women and girls. Only 116 of those cases were entered into the missing persons database. OSBI says it will continue working on the cases with their current staffing.